in Nepal in 2025 that we have seen a complete revolution. People in Pakistan are of the opinion that maybe this is a process and eventually the cycle is going to come leading towards Pakistan seeing such a change. But at the same time that there are those who are of the opinion that no, not at all. This cannot be replicated in Pakistan because there is not one homogeneous or unified voice.
Nepal is also culturally very diverse, many ethnic groups. So if we had been talking last Friday, I would also say the same thing that you were sharing. So I think, it's not just Nepal's uprising. I think any country in the world where the people are feeling dissatisfied with which direction the country is taking, dissatisfied with their leaders, and, generally feeling helpless. In such countries, these kind of uprisings are totally possible.
म्यांमार 2021 में, श्रीलंका 2022 में, बांग्लादेश 2024 में और नेपाल 2025 में ये सिलसिला है मैस अपराइजिंग्स का, रेवोल्यूशन का, स्टेटस को तोड़ने का, जो कि दिखने में आया. एज ऑफ नाउ प्रेजेंट सिचुएशन, द मोस्ट लेटेस्ट इज़ कि जेन जी लेड रेवोल्यूशन नेपाल ने हुकूमत का तख्ता उल्टा. वहाँ के जितनी भी रूलिंग क्लास थी, जो लीड थी, उनको पकड़ा, घरों से निकाला, जला दिया. एक्स प्राइम मिनिस्टर्स, उनकी फैमिलीज़ को, किसी को नहीं छोड़ा. उनको भागने पे मजबूर किया. जो भागे भी वो भी बड़ी मुश्किल से भागे. पहले दिन ही 19 के करीब कोई डेथ्स थी जो कि जेन जी की हुई. अब उसमें क्यों हुई? क्योंकि वो एक पीसफुल प्रोटेस्ट के लिए बाहर निकले थे और हुकूमत ने उन पर फायरिंग की. वो निकले क्यों थे? क्योंकि उससे 4 दिन कबल सोशल मीडिया के ऊपर अक्रॉस द कंट्री बैन लग गया था. ठीक है. सो करप्शन के इश्यूज़ तो थे, प्रेवलेंट थे, नेपोटिज्म के इश्यूज़ भी थे, बट एट द सेम टाइम जो डिसेंट था, जो आवाज़ थी, उसको इस हद तक दबा दिया गया कि कोई कहीं से आवाज़ बाहर निकलने की कोई जगह भी नहीं बची. राइट. सो जेन जी फॉर वंस विदाउट एनी स्पेसिफिक लीडर, यूनिफाइड फॉर वन सिंगुलर गोल, इकट्ठे हुए थे. ठीक है. जब ये पार्लियामेंट के पास गए तो इन पे शूट आउट किया गया. एक और फैक्टर इस सारे के अंदर जो हुआ कि जिस पे इवेंचुअली इतनी बड़ी रेवोल्यूशन निकल आई, वो था कि जब उनके मिनिस्टर साहब ने आके इस चीज़ को एड्रेस किया तो बड़े एक हाई हैंडेडनेस के साथ किया. ही वाज, मतलब कोई एम्पैथी शो नहीं की. सो प्लीज़, देयर इज़ अ लेसन टू बी लर्न फ्रॉम दैट एज वेल. देयर वाज नो एम्पैथी. एंड इवेंचुअली उसके बाद फिर जेन जी थॉट कि नो, अब हम नहीं रुकेंगे. फिर इवेंचुअली सिर्फ जेन जी से हट के, बिकॉज जेन जी मैं इसलिए बार बार कह रहा हूँ बिकॉज जो मैस पीसफुल प्रोटेस्ट की कॉल गई थी वो सिर्फ जेन जी के लिए गई थी. ठीक है. जेन जी से बड़ी कोई 35, 40, 45 साल के लोग थे, उनको कहा गया था कि वो ना ज्वाइन करें. बट इवेंचुअली डे 2 पे वो लोग भी ज्वाइन कर गए. और इवेंचुअली द सिचुएशन व्हाट अनफोल्डेड इज़ के इट वाज अ रेवोल्यूशन, अनदर मैस अपराइजिंग. ठीक है. So to discuss all of this, we reached out to Salil Bhattarai in Nepal, Kathmandu, Nepal. Salil happens to be a member of the General Assembly of Nepal Engineering College. उससे हट के he was an actual member in this revolution. He was at the forefront. पहले दिन पे नहीं थे, लेकिन दूसरे दिन उन्होंने भी ज्वाइन कर लिया था. उसके अलावा इससे हट के he is an entrepreneur and he understands the dynamic of his country. Very kind of him to have been able to given us time, especially considering जो भी situation वहाँ पे बन रही है. Let me just take you directly to the whole show that I had with him. All right, so Zari, the situation over there, since you are based in Kathmandu as we speak, as we record this video right now, I'm sure the emotions must be very high. So I want to start off by asking as to how you are doing right now and what has happened during the last few days.
So most of Nepal is handling this fairly well. On September 8th, we lost a lot of lives in the protests organized by Gen Z. So, the loss of life has been really, really, really difficult to handle and understand, that happened. Secondly, on the second day, we lost a lot of infrastructure, both on the public as well as private side. So although we have not been able to go out to see all of the aftermath of the protests, we have seen videos and photos, whatever the journalists are sharing through the news media, and it's I have no words. We went through a Maoist insurgency. We went through a civil war, 16, 17 years. I think in a day, the loss, the physical loss, was probably on par with whatever we lost during the civil war. We ran through everything on a single day.
The physical infrastructure and the economic loss.
And the economic loss. The country has probably been set back at least 5 years.
All right, and as we speak, the lives that have been lost, the number has crossed over 50, right?
Yes.
Salil, I want to start off by asking as to what led to this. As we know that there was a ban on social media. There were, chronic corruption in the political realm of Nepal, and there has been a history of political mass uprisings over there in the country. But since you know the dynamics of your country better, what can you tell us? What led to this?
So I think we'll need to go back probably around 6, 7 decades ago.
All right.
Back then, the monarchs ruled the country, and around I think 70 some odd years ago, the monarchs then gave power to the people, and that was the first time when democracy was introduced in Nepal.
Right.
Astonishingly, a lot of the faces that we see today in the political sphere, astonishingly, these guys were active from back then. So a
Right.
lot of the older politicians, let's say the outgoing or the ousted prime minister, including, the other guy, there are three major political parties. So most of these guys have been active throughout that era from 50, 60, 70 years ago. Because of that, I think whatever revolution that the country has gone through periodically since then, these guys have been on the forefront of each revolution, of demanding and seeking the people's voice and authority from the
All right.
monarchs.
All right.
That has been the history. However, us as Nepali people, we've not seen any form of physical progress in terms of change in lives of the normal people. That's mainly because whoever has been leading these protests, whoever has been successful in taking power from the monarchs, it's a small group of politicians. These politicians have ruled the country. It's like the local media calls it a musical chair of three political parties. So the prime minister is out of these three political parties, there are three current leaders. Out of these three leaders, someone or the other is always the prime minister. The entire country is kind of a hostage to these political parties, or has been up until these protests. So you can understand there's been extreme cases of corruption, money laundering. We've seen where people have or their news where these local political leaders, not the entire political system, but a few handful of leaders, these guys have amassed huge wealth within as well as outside the country. There are news from outside of Nepal which say that Nepalis are the third largest depositors in Swiss banks. So all of that money is earned or amassed through corruption. There's been understandable frustration through multiple generations. I'm now 44. My father went through the same frustrations. I'm sure the other generation that follow me are going through the same frustrations because of these kinds of rampart corruptions. And it's quite out in the open. Any government office you visit, for a small thing as getting a driving license renewed, to um, any other government service that we as service seekers have to seek, you have to hand out some money unofficially, otherwise your work is not being done. So from the smallest of things to the grand scale of things, we see corruption every day in every facet of our lives. Because of this, there's been growing frustration amongst the entire country, and especially the youth. Nepal sees we have around 200,000 graduates from high schools.
All right.
The number increases slightly because we do provide chance exams to regraduate. So around 200,000 is the annual number. Out of 200,000, 150 to 170,000 students leave the country, right? So that is
All
the
right. All
scenario
right.
among youth. Annually, 7 to 800,000 people additional to the students, 7 to 800,000 people leave to seek better job opportunities elsewhere. So there are permanent migrations, temporary migrations. Nepal supplies a lot of unskilled and semi-skilled workforce to the Middle East, Malaysia, recently Japan. So a lot of the people that are working generational people, a lot of these guys are leaving the country, seeking for better opportunities elsewhere, and that added to the frustration within the country and within whoever is currently working, studying, or living in Nepal. That now, people from my generation, we've poured our frustrations, but we've not actively, we've not been able to mandate any change, or, to be frank, not done anything ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
However, Gen Z, the generation Z or Z, following generation X, of which I'm a member, uh, sorry, Gen Y. I'm Gen X, I think. I keep on forgetting. But Gen Z started, after, I think, the frustration poured out after the social media ban on September 4th. Nepal
Right. Right.
government tried to ban social media entirely, with all major platforms being banned, and
Mm-hmm.
that led to everyone feeling like it was more of a censorship than trying to get the social media companies to register in Nepal. That kind of poured over, and Gen Z, through its various social media platforms, through various groups, started talking about a peaceful protest to oppose the corruption. The social media ban kind of triggered that, because everyone understood that to be the government trying to hide its inadequacies, and try to censor public unrest and public voices. So a lot of the groups on social media, for example, Hami Nepal is being talked about a lot. Hami Nepal translates to us Nepali, so us Nepalese. So these kind of smaller groups started requesting Gen Z youth specifically to participate on a peaceful protest on September 8th. That had been under discussion. So September 4th was the ban, 4, 5, 6, 7. We faced all that. And September 8th, the protest was organized. Very, very, very unofficially, very, democratically, I must say, because there's no single entity or organization that kind of organized or led the protests. So
Uh,
we could see on the streets.
I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off. So, this is, you have led the whole conversation to the actual day of the protest, September 8th. All right. So, before we get on to that and what unfolded after that, so you have shared a whole lot of background as to what caused all of this. That was the baseline. So, what triggered it actually was was the mass ban of the social media. And another thing that we overheard and was reported was the Nepo kids. I mean, the hashtag on social media, it garnered, on TikTok specifically, garnered over millions of views. I mean, was there a lot of resentment in the Gen Z that we are not able to, feed ourselves properly? We are unemployed. There's no structural reform over here in the country, institutional imbalances. Yet there are those individuals, the ruling elite of the country, and their young kids who are bragging all their wealth over there. So that was another factor that triggered all of this, alongside this, finally, along with the unemployment and the other factors that you have stated over here.
Definitely, Ismail. But I think that too was a trigger,
that
because
was a trigger.
yeah, that too was a trigger. Because yes, I mean, there are Nepo kids in Nepal. There are Nepo kids that flaunt their wealth. Uh, for a country like Nepal, it's very difficult to pinpoint and say, this guy is corrupt or that guy is corrupt, because the corruption is always under the radar and always evident but not provable,
Right.
right? So, I'm definitely sure that there's been that kind of resentment brewing within the youth population, especially as I mentioned. The education system in the country is not good. The economic system in the country is not good. The entire scenario in the country is such that everyone talks about leaving the country at any given moment.
The last year, last year the figure crossed to around 800,000 people, from who migrated from Nepal, if I'm not mistaken. That was the actual figure that I was reading into.
Yeah, definitely. That data is probably the labor migration you're talking about. Add to that unofficial, people go to the US on a tourist visa, or they go to UK on a tourist visa, and then and when they get off the get within some foreign country, these guys apply for some different status visas, and that's everyone does that. So yeah, the Nepo kids as well as the social media ban both trends, kind of
Triggered it, acted as a catalyst. So fine, all right. So here we are on the protest day. Actually, this is the September 8th now. You wake up, you see that there is a normal call, a peace, protest, not organized by a unilateral body, but at different factions across the country. Was that the case?
Yes, yes. So what happened is, interestingly, across the country, all major cities, the social media call to participate in a peaceful protest was heard by Gen Z, and there was a lot of participation from that generation, and initially the protests were very peaceful. It turned ugly when the government tried to, I don't know, for lack of a better word.
Tried to suppress.
No, yeah, suppression is one part, but then suppression is you use different levels of physical force to suppress, right? Or try to suppress. They just started fighting, and that was crazy for us. That was emotional for us. I mean, if there had been suppression, the Pathans were being charged, the kids were being detained, the kids were being jailed, or whatever it was. I don't think the second day would have been that crazy.
But
So
they,
I would not suppression. I would call it, I would call it governmental terrorism.
It was governmental terrorism that they ended up killing 19 children, right?
On the first day itself, the fatality numbers increased as we the serious injuries kind of turned fatal in the hospitals. There were a couple of other fatalities that were not announced per se, because they were on the way to the hospital. So second day the number increased. Today the news is that the number is above 50.
Words to explain the state brutality, and you couldn't have put it better. It was state terrorism. So when they initially started directly shooting at the peace protesters, it eventually, all the emotions, they just riled up so much, they charged up so much, that Gen Z thought that no, we're not going back from this. I mean, what were the slogans like? What was the message? I mean, there was no specific individual person leading all the protests. So what unfolded? How it unfolded?
So there were a lot of smaller groups. For example, on the first day, I did not participate because it was specifically for Gen Z, and that was the announcements being made, and it was a peaceful protest. It was just to get attention, get the government's attention, get the political parties' attention, get the member of parliament's attention to the fact that now enough is enough. There's got to be some level of reform, some form of action to be taken to correct all of the missteps. However, I think after the first day, after the mass killing by the government, everyone's emotions were riled up. Everyone's blood started boiling. People like us, the first day that that just went by, we thought, because I was kind of on the outskirts of Kathmandu. I was on my job, so I was running around town. However, once I came back, once I got to see everything, once I read the news, you know, everyone went crazy. There was so much of anger, uh, and I think, the interesting part is, from based off of the first day's reaction, the government kind of tried to play it out. I don't know what these guys were thinking, but it seemed like. So the speaker for the government was the minister of IT, something like that, right? So around, I think, 10, 11, 12, he came and did a press release, and his body language, people hated his body language. He was still uh, very authoritative. He was still very confrontational. The reporters were asking whether the PM would step down. He was very confrontational, and he was like, he tried to make it sound like, this is nothing, just sleep, go home. The PM will not step down. We'll continue as is. We've done nothing wrong. There was no apology. I mean, there was nothing from the government side.
That's the least that you can do. That's the least that you can do.
The basic minimum that as a human you can do, and you're a part of the government. You're a minister. You're a spokesperson for the government. So people are expecting a different body language, a different sort of response from the government. And all they did was, these guys opened the social media. These guys lifted the social media ban. That's it. That was the response to the mass shootings. They did, technically, these guys expressed their sorrow for the lives lost, but that was not evident, and that was not seen from the presentation of the minister.
So, Salil, I have a question over here. I mean, we've seen that there have been mass uprisings in Nepal throughout history. All right. How is this time going to be any different from what has happened in the past? I mean, has there been any discussions amongst the Gen Z or the youth-led, amongst the Gen Z or the leaders, young leaders over there? I mean, how is this going to be any different? Is the question.
Yeah, Ismaeel, it's a wonderful question. In fact, throughout our history, all of the revolts or revolutions or whatever protests were being organized against the then people in power, be it the monarchs, be it someone else. The different systems throughout history has been organized and has been led by some form of public entity, be it political parties or something similar. Okay. So a lot of the reforms on paper have been achieved by the uprising of political parties, right? So the first, I talked about 70, 80 decades ago. That was one of the first uprisings from the public sphere against the then monarch, the monarch-led government. That was when these political parties first kind of organized. Nepali Congress and the communist parties first organized. So throughout our history, all of the protests, all of the similar protests have been led by either Nepali Congress or the communist parties, either separately or jointly. At a later date, early 90s, there was a new communist party called Nepal Communist Party, but Maoist, with a Maoist agenda. Okay, so these guys. Yeah, so there are two primary communist parties, and Nepali Congress is the third one, which is the Democratic Party. So these guys had been leading all of the revolts throughout the history. However, this time, because it was actually a public-led, public organized protest, although there was no single entity or single leader, and there still is no single leader, because it was an actual public protest. The difference, I would say, is whatever reforms or whatever political will was there previously to change the direction of the country, it was managed by a handful of people. especially after the monarchy was abolished in the late 2000s. The entirety of the country's future was decided by these three political parties: Nepali Congress, Nepal Communist Party, Unified Marxist and Leninist (UML), and Nepali Communist Maoists. These three parties have been controlling, or earlier I said taking the country hostage. That's what these guys were doing. So the people's will, or the people's mandate, or the people's the people's vision for the country was never heard. Right? Now, this time around, what has happened is the political system has collapsed within 2 days, in less than 2 days. September 8, the first protest started. September 9, the government collapsed. Today, just I've got the news, and the news has been published in a couple of the online papers, online media, that the parliament has been dissolved by the president, and there's going to be a new female prime minister called Sushila Karki, who has been the Chief Justice of Nepal. She's a retired Chief Justice of Nepal. Very clean figure in the country's political sphere. So there's a lot of change that we have already seen. All of the political parties in the last couple of days are now talking about internal as well as country's reforms. There's been that kind of a discussion across all political parties. Now I think these guys have finally realized that in the past they could get away with calling it a reform when these guys were leading the protests, and one party is protesting, some other party, these guys are protesting, whoever's in the government, it was kind of a musical chair amongst these guys.
Makes sense.
Now the actual people's voice has come forward to mandate a concrete change in how the country operates. Hats off to the Gen Z crowd. There are a couple of people that are really pushing this quite hard. I hope for some material change in the constitution, as well as in the basic reforms that we wanted. I think this time around that is now possible.
So alongside all of this, we also heard that there were attacks on jails. There were actual jailbreaks across the country. There were thousands of prisoners that were released, and amongst those prisoners were the ones who were actually charged with capital crimes. Doesn't that leave the audiences and the masses to a lot of risk? What's going to happen to the released prisoners?
So I think there are figures of around 12 to 13,000 prisoners escaping prisons. However, there was a notice today from the central administration that all of the prisoners are being called back, those who willingly come back. So out of the 13,000 prisoners that escaped, I think around 3,000 or 4,000 prisoners have already come back, been apprehended. The remaining are being called back as well, with a notice that if these guys don't come back voluntarily, there's going to be a different case filed against them for fleeing the prison. So I think there is some view of public. The public is quite scared because these guys are different kind of prisoners are out. So the public is quite scared. But I think Nepal army, the way they have taken control and taken charge of the country, and the way they have presented themselves as the safeguards of public safety, that has been a big help.
So that has been a big help, but they have presented themselves as the savior of the masses. That doesn't sound too promising, considering the fact that there are countries where military usually ends up leading the way and dominating the political realm of the country. So if that's a case or a possibility over there in the future of Nepal, would that be acceptable to the Gen Z?
No, definitely not. And I don't think we've seen anything of that sort. I do understand Pakistan's position in this. However, in Nepal, we've not seen that historically as well. And even this time around, we have not seen that kind of aggression from the military. like I mentioned earlier, 20 minutes ago, we got a news that through the efforts of the military, the president's office, Gen Z protesters, as well as the political parties, all of their efforts have led up to Madam Sushila Kargi being appointed as the first lady prime minister of Nepal. So I think army has done their job in safeguarding our physical premises and safeguarding the country's interest, and they've also played a very key role in organizing these decisions amongst all of these stakeholders.
Right, that's a promising start after the uprising. What does the foreign policy look like now in future? Can you comment as to what's the tilt going to be? Is Nepal still going to be tilted more towards China and less optimistic towards US, or favorable to India? Or
See, I mean, foreign policy in Nepal uh, has been quite clear, I think. Although they've missteps from as I understand, there's been some missteps along the way from the political parties. We've been very clear on the fact that the foreign policy should be, to keep balance between China and India for us, as well as the third nations, which for us is mainly the United States. It's slightly different because India and China is not as easy for us because we have an open border with India. No, not even a porous border. We have a completely open border with India, and with China, there's a physical barrier of the Himalayas, right? So there are some number of passes where we have had our custom offices and our immigrations and our checkpoints. However, the borders are not similar between India and China for us. So which means that for us, our agricultural fields are shared between India and Nepal. However, the same is not true for Nepal and China. So because of the land sharing and because of the cultural similarities and because of the ease of movement between India and Nepal, there's a lot more dependency of the people on both sides, on each other, Indians and Nepalis, especially along the border. Because of which I think Nepal is more tilted towards economically as well as culturally. Nepal is more tilted towards India rather than China, although we have a good trading volume with China as well. So because of all this, the foreign policy is kind of understood that we're more in favor of India than China. However, because we're in the middle, we have to keep some balance. Because we do share a huge amount of border with both of these countries. As for the US has always been interested in Nepal because of its geographical proximity to both India and China, right? So there's been a lot of interference from the West. However, we as a country don't have a strong foreign policy in terms of dealing with the West.
Makes sense. All right. Before conclusion, one last thing that I want to understand is, what do the people of Nepal think about this uprising in terms of the fact that there was a pattern attached to it? I mean, we saw Myanmar in 2021, Sri Lanka in 2022, Bangladesh in 2024, and now here we are in Nepal in 2025, that we have seen a complete revolution. People in Pakistan are of the opinion that maybe this is a process and eventually the cycle is going to come leading towards Pakistan seeing such a change. But at the same time, that there are those who are of the opinion that no, not at all, this cannot be replicated in Pakistan because there is not one homogeneous or unified voice across the country. There are different ethnic majorities situated over here. There are different populations divided by linguistic and different divisions, and everybody has their own sets of goals that they want to achieve, and not a unified voice for a one singular goal that has to be achieved. Plus, military has their things sorted over here, and the political parties are selfish, to put it in simple words. So it cannot be replicated over here. What can you comment regarding this?
Nepal is also culturally very diverse, many ethnic groups. So if we had been talking last Friday, I would also say the same thing that you were sharing, because there are so many different ethnic groups, because there are so many different cultural divides, because there are so many, Bahubhashiya log, right, in Nepal as well. And add to that, a lot of the families are, there are some Congress families, there are some communist families. It works like that in Nepal. So Nepal is very politically aware. But apart from all of that, I think there's been dissatisfaction in terms of, we touched upon the corruption, we touched upon, lack of jobs, lack of good education infrastructure, all of that kind of added to the frustrations of the younger Nepali population. That dissatisfaction kind of united the entire Gen Z. We also participated eventually. We were generation prior to us and preceding us and succeeding us. All of us are dissatisfied. However, the unity in terms of organizing the protests came forward because of this, I think. So I think, it's not just Nepal's uprising. I think any country in the world where the people are feeling dissatisfied with which direction the country is taking, dissatisfied with their leaders, and, generally feeling helpless. In such countries, these kind of uprisings are totally possible.
All right. Got the point. So thank you so much for your time, Salil. Thank you so much. Dearly hoping and praying that Nepal sees better days ahead. I mean, that is all that can be said as of now, because it is a changing situation and every minute is of vital and, critical importance as of now. Prayers for the martyrs, prayers for the ones who were affected, prayers for the one who suffered, and best wishes to the country over there. Thank you so much, Salil. Once again, this is me, Ismaeel Qasim, signing out. Until next time. Adha.